Okay, so finishing up, we had 6m plus 34m plus 16m plus 14m, altogether totals 70m, which is 70 meters. Okay, now, in a previous problem, we had to square sorry, wrong page. We had to square x plus 6. And we did FOIL, or we did the box method, by putting the factors on the outside and multiplying them to get the numbers on the inside. This time, we're going to go backwards. We're going to have the numbers on the inside, and we're going to have to go backwards to find the factors on the outside. Okay, so if you look at your homework, you're going to do your Math Nation practice book 10.5, and you're going to do these problems. I'm going to go through and explain to you the toughest question on your homework. If you can get through these, you can do your Math Nation practice book as well. Okay? First off, I'm not going to do these problems with you. They're true and false. But in order to get credit, you're going to go ahead and attach a marked picture that explains it. Now, these aren't overly difficult, but you have to really read and understand what the question's asking. And by marking your picture, you'll know whether it's true or false. When you get to y equals 0, remember y, we think of it being vertical, but the line it creates is really horizontal. Okay? So look at these as horizontal lines. So I'm going to write on here horizontal. We think of y being vertical, but it's really not. Y equals 0. Y equals 0 here. Okay. Y equals 4 is here. And then you're going to answer these as true and false. Okay? All right. These are just like the previous notes I gave you, so I'm not going to give you these again. These are just a little bit more practice because these are the kind of questions you're going to see. But down here, it says points K and M are points of tangency. K and M are touching the circle at exactly 1 point. Find the value or values of X. So I really want to hone in on these two problems. So I'm going to make this a little bigger, so we can really focus on these two problems, okay? What do we know about JK and JM? Well, from the previous example, we found that if they're tangent to this from the same common point, then these two are congruent. So these are going to be congruent. How do we solve things that are congruent? You simply set them equal to each other. And the only thing I really want to tell you on this problem, because this is x squared, when we take the square root of x squared, remember, we don't know if this number under the radical was positive 2 or a negative 2, because a positive 2 times a positive 2 would be a 4. A negative 2 times a negative 2 would be a positive 4. So remember, whatever you get for x is going to be positive or negative. Okay? And then you can plug it in and see whether your answer works both ways or not. But I want to focus on 15. Okay, so the idea is the same, that these are congruent, so that doesn't make it any harder. Okay? But the algebra is harder. 2x squared plus 3x minus 2 is simply going to equal 3. And we know that when we have an x squared that doesn't cancel out, we end up having to move everything to one side and set this equal to 0 so that we can factor it. 3 minus 3 is 0. And then we end up with 2x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. And then we're going to find out what were the factors that we multiplied together to get this. So now, instead of using the box method to get them inside the box, we're going to use the box method to get them from inside the box outside the box. Okay? So, we know that two numbers multiplied to give me a 2x squared, and two numbers multiplied to give me the negative 5. So we're going to start by working the box backwards. Because it's a quadratic, 2 times 2 is 4, we'll have 4 terms, where we know this first term is 2x squared, and we know the last term is going to be negative 5. Okay, so let's start there. 2x squared, well, what numbers multiply to give me 2? There's only one set, a 2 and a 1. So this is going to be a 2x, and this is going to be a 1x. All right, there's only two numbers that can give me a negative 5. That's going to either be negative 5 and a 1, or it's going to be a positive 5 and a negative 1. So which combination is it going to be? Well, we don't know, but we know that 5, if it's positive, it's bigger than 1, so my middle term would have to be positive, because we end up adding these together. If we look at negative 5 and 1, the bigger number is negative, so this middle term would have to be negative, and it's not, it's positive. So we're going to cancel out using the negative 5 and the positive 1, and instead we're going to focus on using the 5 and the negative 1. So which side do we go on? Well, 2 times 5 is going to give me 10, and 10 minus 1 is 9, much, much bigger than 3. So we're going to do it on the opposite side. Instead of doing 2 times 5 and getting 10, we're going to do 2 times 1, and that's a negative 1, so that'll be negative 2. And then we're going to put the 5 on the other side, because that's going to be 5 times 1, negative 1. Okay, so 2 times 1 is 2 squared. 1 times 5 is 5x. And negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. And negative 1 times 2 is negative 2x. When we add these middle terms together, we end up with 5x minus 2, which gives me 3. All right, so let me say that again. We know that our first term is 2x squared. We know that my second term was negative 5. Okay? We know that the middle term was a combination of 2. So we were not quite sure what those factors are, so we have to find them. So we start by looking at the 2x squared, and we know that two numbers make up 2, 2 and a 1. So we put 2x and 1x, and we end up with 2x squared. The last term is negative 5. So it's either going to be negative 5 and a 1, or it's going to be a positive 5 and a negative 1. Well, we kind of look at this middle term for that middle term to decide or to tell us which direction we want to go. And because this term is positive, we know that the bigger number has to be positive because we're ending up adding a positive and a negative. If I end up with a negative 5, negative is going to be too big. Positive is going to give me that positive that I want. All right, so where do I put the 5? Do I put it on this side or this side? Well, we have to look at what's being multiplied. Is it 1 times 2, which gives me here 1 times 5, which is going to give me the 5x? If I had reversed the order, it would have been 2 times 5, and that would have given me a number way too big. You can do it either way and practice both of them. Okay, once we find out what these factors are, we simply take these factors and we put them together. 2x plus 5 equals 0, or we end up with x minus 1 equals 0. And then we solve the problem. Move the 1 to the other side, we get x equals a positive 1. Or we move the 5 to the other side and we get 2x equals negative 5. When we divide by 2, we end up with x equals negative 5 halves. It's a little bit clearer on my other notes that I've uploaded, so take a peek at those. We have two values of x, a positive and a negative. That's it. That's as hard as it gets. Do your best on your homework. You guys got this. You guys got it. You really do. Bye.